The opinions, views, and conclusions expressed in this show are those of the show host and co-host and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of KPFV FM or its affiliates.
The Seventh Amendment Hour, a discussion of the Fifth and the Seventh Amendments. Now here's your host, Gary Bergman, and co-host, Mike Noyes.
Good morning once again. This is Gary Bergman, the People's Warrior, and we're here with my co-host, Keith Jones, and our guest, Joseph Douglas, right? Or is it
Douglas Joseph?
Douglas Joseph. Okay, we're going to understand this here today. And it looks like we have a beautiful chemtrail-free day. It's all blue sky, so that's good. We don't have to breathe the chemicals. And this day, we're having this special show to help you people get educated on what the straw man is, which you need to know. And Mr. Joseph.
Actually, you should...
I don't want to use it, Mr. I'm sorry.
Mr. Do you know why?
Yes. So, but you can go ahead and explain it.
All right. Sure. What you'll notice is that I'll just share the experience I've had over and over again. When they ask for the name, what is your name? They're referring, and I say they, if this is a government actor, they're referring to the first and last name. But I always confirm that. Are you asking about the first and last name? What name are you talking about? And they'll say, yeah, the first and last name. Well, that's not me. That's the business that I control. But if you want to know who I am, if that name, you can refer to me as Douglas Joseph. That's my given name. So then they'll respond, okay, Mr. Joseph, and I have to correct them. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you right there. You can drop the Mr. and just refer to me as Douglas or Douglas Joseph. Well, what is Joseph? That is the Christian name, but it's part of the given name. So the given name is comprised of what people will normally refer to as the first and middle name. But it's only a first and middle name when used in the context of that name that's referred to as a legal name that's on the certificate of live birth. Mm-hmm. So essentially, what I'm going to be talking about today is how we're being tricked from the time we are actually born, where we can't really rely on our mom and dad to take care of us until we're old enough to start to make decisions on our own. Our moms and dads don't know what I'm sharing with you. If they did, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with the certificate of live birth. It's a document. It has a legal name. So the first thing you have to understand is what a legal name is. A legal name is only used in the context of commerce. And Walmart is a legal name. Bank of America is a legal name. Starbucks is a legal name.
All commerce.
All part of commerce and all registered entities. Who are they registered with? Do you know what commercial entities register with? What government agency they register with?
Department of Commerce?
It's actually the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, okay.
Right, which is the head of commerce. The Department of Commerce is actually a federal agency, but at the state level, there's a Secretary of State. There's actually a Secretary of State at the federal level, too.
No, wait a minute. Isn't the Department, Secretary of State and also the Department of Commerce independent corporations?
Well, they are private businesses that are agencies of a registered corporate entity called the United States.
Okay.
So the United States, Inc. is registered in Delaware. You can look it up on the Secretary of State's website. All of these are sub-corporate entities of the United States.
That's like I just found out the United States controls Australia and South Africa.
Right. They're registered entities. They're registered here.
Right.
So is Canada. So is Mexico. So is any of the countries that are part of the central banking system.
Oh, I didn't know it was that big because I happened to be on the International Common Law Court of Justice in Australia, and they had a posting there, and it showed South Africa and Australia being tied in with the United States Corporation.
Right. Do you know what the first clue is that that's the case?
No.
What's the world reserve currency?
Oh, well, you mean the dollar.
Yeah. Where does that dollar come from?
Oh, excuse me, Federal Reserve note.
Right. But where does that come from?
Comes out of this treasury over here.
Right.
Well,
At least the impression is.
Well, actually, it was printed in the Philippines, and they subcontracted out to Cambodia, who flooded the market with other ones. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
So you're saying the printing presses are actually in the Philippines?
Yes.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this certificate of live birth that we're handed, and at the age of 16, we're all excited to go down and get a driver's license. Mm-hmm. That's programmed into our minds from the time we want to drive a car.
Right.
See, that's something that young people all want to do. Why? Why does everyone want to drive? It provides us with freedom, right?
Yeah.
It gives us the ability to go places that we otherwise wouldn't be able to go.
But in reality, they just enslaved us.
Well, you're right. And it's a voluntary thing, though.
Right.
See, none of this works unless it's voluntary. It's got to be voluntary. If you go to the code books, I'm just going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, and you look up any code, just open a code book and point to it. If they're referring to who that law applies to, there's one word they always use, and they only use that one word. Do you know what that word is?
Mm-mm.
Person.
A corporation.
Which is a corporation.
That's right.
A limited liability company, limited liability partnership. It's all these things that we all know are businesses.
So we was in the sheriff's office, and we were talking about right to drive. Mm-hmm. And she read us the NRS, and she kept putting the word persons in there, and me and a few other people that went in there to talk to her about this were just kind of smirking. She's, what did I say wrong? I said, well, do you know what the legal definition for person is? What's a human being? I said, no. You ever look at Black's Law Dictionary? I said, all these words have legal meaning. And it said, they usually refer to Black's Law, and there's another one they refer to. So if you go look at the Black's Law, it would tell you it's a corporation, a labor organization.
Right.
A municipality. There's so many different definitions.
Correct.
And the person where the change actually came was during the Civil War with Congress. So I said, how can a corporation get a ticket for driving?
Right. How could it drive anything?
That's right.
How can an entity do anything? It cannot act.
That's correct.
It relies on government actors to act on its behalf. That's exactly what that woman was doing. She's acting on behalf of government, but she's not government.
No, that's what gets me. They don't take the time to learn the law, what's legal and what's not, or to educate their deputies. They put their deputies in harm, per se, when it comes to liability suits all the time.
Personal liability.
Personal liability to be sued or even arrested.
How do we hold those persons accountable? That's what I'm going to focus on after I get through this part. So what we do is we go down to the DMV, we stand in line, we go through this process, which is something we think we have to do, and we sign something saying that the person that's identified on this ID card is the person that has a picture next to it, and that signature is the signature of the first and last name. So what that does, it's a license. So what is a license? A license is a license to break the law. Because if you don't have a license, impossible to break the law. Why is that? It's because we're incriminating ourselves by false personation. You're saying you're that person on that driver's license. Is it their job to tell you you're not? No, because they believe that too.
Right.
The government actor has the last name on his uniform, his or her uniform. So they're saying, I'm telling you my last name. Look, I need to know yours. So that person, when you go back to that definition of person and you look at who needs a driver's license, it refers to any person who operates a motor vehicle. Well, that means they're referring to Walmart as if it can drive a vehicle. We know it can't drive a vehicle, right?
Right.
Common sense tells us that. But are we thinking, how can we be like that? If they're saying that's a person, how can I be that?
Yeah.
So in those definitions, there's one word that refers to the first and last name. Individual. It will say any individual or corporation or limited liability partnership or limited liability company, blah, 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 or any other entity. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Justice Court, the Pahrump Justice Court's website, and look up their rules of the court, it defines person right on the front page. It's like number 5. She's got it right here.
Oh, okay.
She copied.
I just keep my Black's Law dictionary with me all the time.
Oh, okay. They actually give the definition right there for persons. If you look at the highlighted there, I think it's number 5.
Yeah.
So go ahead and read, read that.
Yeah, it's just like Black's Law. Person shall include and apply to corporations, firms, associations, and other entities, as well as natural persons. So, what's
a natural person?
That's what I can
So
have my opinion, but I have to look at Black's Law.
When you look up a natural person, it will say, as opposed to an artificial person, a natural person is a human being. Well, wait a minute. What's a being? A human, if it was a man, why aren't they just using that word man? Hue means color. Man is a man. I'm talking to you man to man right now. And I'm looking at you, so I know you're a man.
So a human is a colored man.
Color of a man.
Color of a man.
If you're acting under color of law, what does that mean?
We're in trouble.
It means that you're acting as if that law were real, but the color of law is just giving the appearance that it's real, and it's not. So who's giving the appearance that it's real? We are, by saying we're that first and last name. And then we compound it by having a picture on a card that has that first and last name. So that right there tells you what person is. When you look at the law, because see, I'm going to point right to a law. All this, the equity stuff and admiralty law, there's nothing in written law that talks about that. That's all a distraction. And it's very complicated. What I'm pointing to is very simple. Every state has a law that requires you register any name that you use to transact business in that state. That part you're looking at there is the Nevada revised statutes regarding the law that refers to creating a DBA. Now, why is that important? Because the penalty is not a fine, a monetary fine, and it's not a jail sentence. It's that if you are sued, they're going to sue that person, right? The person is the first and last name. So if you end up in court, which ultimately, if you say, I don't need one of these driver's licenses, people think you're going to end up in court. So when you end up in court, what's the first thing the judge is going to want to establish?
Jurisdiction.
Well, and how does he do that? Jurisdiction over that person. How do they do that? What's your name?
Right.
Yeah.
Just say,
State your full name.
Yeah.
So if they ask me that, which name would you like me to state? Well, your full name. Well, you understand the full name is the legal name. Yes, I understand that. You understand that the legal name is an entity, and an entity in and of itself cannot act on its own. It needs someone to act on its behalf. And in this case, the plaintiff, which would be the people of the state of Nevada, is an entity that's represented by a licensed attorney. I'm not a licensed attorney, nor do I want to be. But I am the name holder who has total control over all the assets that are owned by and held in that legal name. And I registered that name just like Walmart registers their name with the Secretary of State, only I used a different instrument. And the instrument that they're giving us in this state here, I believe they refer to it as a fictitious name. In California, it's a fictitious business name. In Minnesota, it's called an assumed business name. Why are they using the terms fictitious and assumed?
Let me break it up and ask you a question, though. Nevada, Colorado, and Utah was never brought in. They're not even yet recognized as states officially. They never applied for statehood.
Well, you can go even...
Second question with that half.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Is the state, or not state, excuse me, the county of Knight and the city of Pahrump, neither one are incorporated.
Well, it's not a city, it's a town.
Or
it's a town, isn't it?
Yes,
it's a town. So city would be, then it would be incorporated if it became a city. It's a town. That's the difference there. But all of this stuff is under this umbrella that they call commerce.
I understand. I'm just trying to figure out if that has something to do with what.
Absolutely. And it goes even further back than that, because if you look at the Hidalgo Treaty, which was signed by Francisco Santa Anna and a gentleman by the name of Nicholas Trist. Nicholas Trist was a clerk that was sent by James Polk, who was the president of the United States at that time. He was sent to talk to Francisco Santa Anna because this was all Mexico.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't have the dates but if you look at history, that treaty was never signed by the president.
That's right. That's why I'm asking the question.
Nicholas Trist was a clerk. He was supposed to go there for 6 months and come back and report to Polk how much money Francisco Santa Anna wanted for all of Mexico. He wanted Mexico in its all the way down. And Francisco said, no, we're going to draw the line right here. But we'll sell you everything else above that for $15 million. That's what the Hidalgo Treaty was. Okay. Nicholas Trist put his little commission in there. He got a 10% commission. Not bad.
So that actually this treaty was never ratified.
What happened was Polk refused to sign that treaty. Congress said, we don't need you. They overstepped their bounds and said, we're approving this anyway. Polk had nothing to do with it. He washed his hands of it, kind of like Pontius Pilate washing his hands. Yeah. He wanted nothing to do with it. He said, he was angry with Nicholas Trist. Nicholas Trist was related to him somehow. He was doing him a favor by giving him that clerk job because Trist had actually been in trouble with the law for fraud. He was selling land and not disclosing, and he didn't even own it.
Political favors.
Of course. So what happened there was just nobody was paying really close attention, and there was no way for the majority of people to know what was going on, but it was never signed by James Polk. They cannot produce a copy of that treaty with any other signature other than this guy, Nicholas Trist. It's all an illusion. We're technically in Mexico, but are we in Mexico? Who established it as Mexico? See, men and women cannot own anything. The concept of ownership is an illusion. What can own something in this realm of commerce? A registered entity. So when you claim to be that first and last name, which is an entity that they've given to you, remember, they are the ones that created this. How do we know that? What's at the top of this? It says State of California. That's the title. Who owns that name? They do. It's not mine. Same with that tax identifier called a Social Security number. They assign to that.
Right.
That's not my number. If you look at your Social Security card, it will actually say on there, this card is the property of the Social Security Administration. If we ask for it back, you must return it. You have to give it back. Right? Do they ask for it back very often? No. They give it to you and they want you to use it. And they tell you not to be used for identification purposes.
I got that on there.
So that's true. So when it's connected to this first and last name, it's not being used to identify that name. It's being used to track it in commerce. That's all it is. So when it's a business and you know it's a business, you register that name. Now you become the controller of that name. It's not your name. It was given to you to control, and because that's what can own the vehicle you drive, whatever you possess. So whatever you're in possession of, if it's under that name, so let's say it's a piece of property, what's on the grant deed? The first and last name, right?
Right.
So do you have to change anything on that grant deed? No. That's what owns the property. What the law says is this is the name that's transacting the business. You aren't. You're not a party to that at all. You represent that name. So an attorney in a court case is not a party to that case. It's the representative. Does that attorney ever go to jail? No.
So this is the way Roosevelt, after he took away property rights, got to brainwash people into thinking they own property.
Right. And that was what, after 1933?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So we're doing this to ourselves. All we have to do is be aware of this obscure law. When I found that law and the light bulb went on, I tried to register this first and last name in California. They call it a fictitious business name statement. Okay. I was born in Pasadena, right? There's two children on this form. Number one is this child. Down here, where the attending physician says, I hereby certify that the child was born alive. That's the child. That's me. This child, which is the one above, is the first and last name.
Which is the entity.
Which is the entity that's on that piece of paper. They hand it to you. You go down. You claim that name is you. And now you've got proof. You got that driver's license. And when people get that driver's license and you say, hey, you don't want to have that thing, you ought to get rid of that. It's like, no, don't take that away from me.
So they actually have both here on the same certificate.
Absolutely.
Well, it says, I hereby certify from the doctor that I attended this birth and that the child was born alive at the hour, date, and place stated above.
Right. So you know where else they use that same trick?
Right.
In something called the Constitution. If you start reading it, you'll see places where they'll refer to the Constitution, and then you'll see them refer to this Constitution. So which one is it?
That's what I'm saying. They have both of them on there, so they cover themselves both ways.
Well, it's a method of confusing people.
That's what I'm saying.
With words that actually in the commercial realm mean something. But when I'm talking to you and I say, you know what, Gary, you seem like a good person to me, you know I'm talking about you as a man, not as a person in the realm of commerce.
Right.
I'm talking to you man to man. You step into that courtroom, that's court business. Now you're transacting business. That's commerce.
Yeah.
That's when all this lingo kicks in. That's why they have their own diction. And the dictionary is what backs up their realm. They use their own definitions. So what you'll find is that the most codes will define words right in the first part of the code, just like the court rules. Those don't say they're codes or laws. They're rules of the game. This is all a game.
That's like when we make up our paperwork, we always say, for reference to legal definition, to Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition.
What you should do is reference it to the actual code. When they're referencing it.
No, we're making our own codes.
Well, that's okay. See, we know that there's a law for us. It's called common law. But common law is unwritten law.
Now you know what NRS.
That's the definition of common law. It's unwritten law. What is that? You do unto others.
Common sense.
It's common sense. Yeah. If you damage somebody, you got to make restitution.
So we have written in NRS 1.030 that common law of England is the law of the state. So the common sense of the Englishman is who we go by.
Right. But it's not we. It's not we. You said we.
Well,
they do.
Yeah, they, right.
So what is they? They is the stakeholders in this whole system. Who are the stakeholders? Remember, holder is different than owner. You can be an account holder, but you can't be an account owner. The holder is, I'll give you an example. If you're involved in a bankruptcy, there's a bankruptcy trustee. That trustee is an attorney. That's the holder. That attorney controls all the assets, and oftentimes it'll be in a probate or something where someone has died and there's no will. So what does that attorney do? Holds all that property and makes the determination of who the owner is. And if you claim to be the owner and it's not a registered entity, guess what? You're not recognized. You don't exist. So how do you prove that you exist? The paperwork, one of the things you get is a certificate of existence and registration. And it states that that entity was filed on a certain date. It's the one with the border around it, the dark border. I'm not sure if you have it there.
No, I don't think so on this one. Well, that's just like you're saying, when the judge asks you for your name, and you use that entity name, you just perjured yourself.
It's exactly right, but they're not obligated to tell you that.
Oh, no.
In fact, they'll encourage you to say
Yes.
that. When you say that's not me, they'll say, what proof do you have? Oh, well, I'm glad you asked that. I have an assumed name certificate. I'm the name holder for that entity. This is the document right there. If you read that on the face of it, it says right there, this is to certify that this entity is registered and it exists. It's in existence. So if you don't register that name, guess what? In the eyes of the court, you do not exist.
Now, how about copyright in your name?
No such thing.
No such thing. Okay.
Show me a law that says you have to copyright. I can show you the one right there, right here, that says that the Nevada revised statute says any name that you use to transact business must be registered. Any name.
Registered. Not
Registered.
copyrighted. So copyright's a waste of time.
Registered, not copyrighted.
Okay.
Copyright is a distraction. This is what these I don't know what you want to call them, disinfo. They're basically paid by corporations to keep this thing going. Corporations are the ones that are benefiting from this. Corporations control this because it is a corporate world. We are not corporations, though. We're men and women. This is not a corporation either, the first and last name. It's an individual. What's the difference between an individual and a corporation? The major difference? No license. When you register the name with the assumed name certificate, you don't get a license. All you get is a piece of paper that says this entity is registered. This person is registered with the Minnesota Secretary of State and is active and in good standing. And for $50, it's good for 10 years. All you have to do is every year go and renew it. And if you don't renew it, what happens? They abandon that name. So if it's not renewed, the assumption is, oh, they're dead. They're gone. So we're going to abandon it. So the state actually just lets it go. But if you're awake and breathing still, you'll get an email that says it's time to renew that. You get it sometime in it's actually last month in September. And you have that 3-month period.
So are you alive?
Yes. I as soon as I got that email, I went straight to that website. It took me about 30 seconds to renew it. That's all it is, a click. That's the only reporting requirement.
Took you 30 seconds on that cold blue to come out of it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't cost you anything to renew it.
Nothing.
Okay, and the same question is going to, do you need an address in Minnesota to do this?
No. No, sir.
Okay.
What's the advantage of Minnesota versus Nevada now?
Because they've closed the doors in every other state. When I tried to register in Orange County and Los Angeles County, they tried to get the sheriff to come and arrest me.
And
I knew what they were doing. I just walked out.
The reason they wanted to arrest you?
Because I was telling them, your legislation has a law that requires this name be registered.
It requires what now?
That the name on this certificate of live birth, which came from your office, it's the other side of the clerk's office, is where you get these documents. So one side is where all the recording of deeds and where you go to get a copy of this. And the other side is all for fictitious business name statement filing.
So what right or law or California statute did they have to arrest you on? What was the reason?
They don't need one. In their minds, as long as they can identify you as that first and last name. So they would have run into problems. But why would I stick around if I know
waste your time.
They don't want my money?
Yeah.
Well, isn't government in business for a profit?
That's right.
Of course they are. So why is that government employee not doing?
Well, they're probably going to make more
job?
money off arresting you.
Well, no, that's not the reason. I'm striking at the heart of exposing the whole system. And it's not fraud. It's not fraud because we're doing it to ourselves. It becomes a personal liability for the CEO. Who's the CEO of the world of commerce, the realm of commerce in the state of California?
Well, I guess Brown, unless there's somebody else.
Secretary of State.
Oh, Secretary of State. Okay.
Brown is just the governor. Secretary of State is who dictates who becomes governor. Right? Who's in charge?
Yeah.
Secretary of State is who determined that Brown was the governor. And we all know that the elections are rigged.
Oh, yeah, right.
So the Secretary of State is above the governor.
Right.
People don't understand that. So Alejandro Padilla is the name, the first and last name of that Secretary of State. He's got a bullseye on his forehead because there is going to be a lawsuit. I'm getting ready to file a federal lawsuit against that person for allowing a law to be legislated and then not allowing us, the people who figure this out, to comply with that law. How are they denying that? Do you know what a notary public is?
Yeah.
They're requiring a notary public. That's one thing. But there's also number 4 on their form that all the counties use is worded differently from the legislation. If you go to the legislation, which is in the Business and Professions Code, it's section 17900 to 17930, and you read that, you'll see in the body of the legislation, they actually have the format that the form has to follow. And number 4 says, what is the nature of your business? So if I ask you, what is the nature of your business? How would you answer that? I'm sorry, I don't know what you do, Gary, but
I'm retired now.
Okay.
But I was a contractor.
Okay. So the nature of your business is either building homes or you're an electrical contractor.
Piping.
Right.
Powerhouses.
Right. So if you're Microsoft, what's the nature of your business?
Yeah.
Software. Right? Okay. So what's the nature of my business? Asset management. Ooh, they don't like that. That's the nature of my business. So what do they give you a choice of in that number 4, though? It's a multiple choice. And what do they ask? Instead of what is the nature of your business, it's this business is conducted by. Well, wait a minute. That has nothing to do with the nature of my business. And what are the choices you're giving me? Corporation, a limited liability partnership, a limited liability company, and then individual. Right?
Yeah.
That's where they're saying this business is conducted by. Where is the none of the above? There is no answer like that.
So if you don't check it, they check it for you.
Well, I changed the wording. I said the legislation said that's supposed to be the nature of the business. So I altered the form. They said I altered a government form. Well, if you look at the form that Nevada uses, and I think that's in here, the form doesn't even have a number at the bottom. Where's the control number? All government forms have to have an OMB number.
Right.
That doesn't have one. Why? That is for us. But that's a trick. Why? Look, it requires a notary. What does a notary do? A notary public's job is to certify that the person that's signing on this line is the same person who's identified up above as the first and last name.
So if you sign it with the last name, comma, first name.
It's not a last name. It's a surname.
Well, surname. Okay.
Remember, they call it a last name, but if it's in first position, how can it be last?
Yeah.
It can't. See, they're tricking us into thinking.
So
that
if I
is
get
a last name.
when I go to the doctor and I get a form, they say fill out, and then they go last name, then they go the first and middle initial.
Right.
So
they're dictating where to put it on the form, and they're telling you this is the last name. So that's another trick.
So what do we do? Cross out the last and put
you
surname?
Don't go to the doctor for one.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. I try my best to stay away. In fact, we're going to have a show on medical complaints here next Thursday.
Right. If it's involving commerce, though, And that is commerce, because they want that information so they can get paid. You give them that first and last name because that's what is transacting business. You're not a party to that. When you buy a ticket, a plane ticket, they ask for the first and last name. Is the business flying? I don't think so. But what's on that manifest? The flight manifest has the first and last name. So you're the name holder. It bought the ticket. You're just along for the ride.
All right. So then we get the form, and I go to the bottom of the form. It says signature. Now, do I sign it? How?
Well, if it's a contract, if you're agreeing to do something, in other words, you have to perform, it's really the business that's having to perform. That's what a contract's all about. And if you're a contractor, you know that. Business is all about contract. So in the case where it's a doctor's form, is that a contract? Or is it just information? If it's just information you're offering up, and you're certifying, though, under penalty of perjury, that's a contract.
Right.
So you better sign it. If I was signing it, it would be Herrick, comma, Douglas Joseph, DBA, Douglas Joseph Herrick. So it's the surname, given name, which is the name holder, doing business as that.
Yeah, so you're always putting the
name.
DBA in there.
Absolutely, because you're doing business as that person. You are not that person. So when someone signs a driver's license, they sign the first and last name. You've just committed perjury because you can't possibly. Can Walmart sign its own name? No. Someone has to sign on behalf of Walmart. See, if Walmart is sued, someone accepts service on behalf of Walmart. So now someone's coming to your door, knocking on the door. Are you Douglas Herrick? No, I'm not. But I know what Douglas Herrick is. And if you have any business to do with Douglas Herrick, you're going to have to go through me. I'm the name holder and the CEO. What do you need? Well, we need you to admit you're Douglas Herrick. Why do you need me to admit I'm? You want me to lie? I can't. I'm sorry, I can't do that. But I have proof that that name is a registered entity, and that it's doing business legally in the state. It's transacting business legally. And when I show that to them, if they're still going to say, well, who are you? I'm the name holder. Well, I'm going to need to see some ID. Well, I don't have any state ID. I don't have a driver's license, but I have a passport. Oftentimes, they won't accept the passport.
But federal law says you don't have to supply identification. You just have to supply
a
your
passport is not an ID.
Yep.
Well, that's true.
It's not an ID. Why? Do you know why it's not an ID?
Go ahead.
It's missing a couple of components. One is a first and last name. It says right on there, surname, given name.
Well, I don't have a passport, so I don't know.
I do. I'll show you mine. And I carry it with me wherever I go because that is what is, it doesn't identify me. It tells them where I came from and what I'm known as.
So what kind of passport do you have? Is U.S. citizen or American national?
It's a USA passport.
Oh.
It's the same one everyone gets, though. It's USA, though.
But according to UN bylaws, they're supposed to be two. They're supposed to be
It
American
says United
national.
States of America. The United States of
All right,
America is not the United States. The United States is a corporate entity. The United States of America is the geographic region.
And if you say identity, if you separate ID and then you have entity, think about that for a minute.
Well, I'm looking at this picture. Don't look the same.
It's me. That's before I
How
became.
old's this picture?
It's about 6 years old. I realized I was eating the wrong food. I eat nothing but fruit now. I lost about 40 pounds from that picture.
Wow.
And the cancer that they claimed I had is gone. It's not a miracle though. It's diet. That's a whole nother story. That's another
a big
program.
Yeah, that's a big, difficult story.
That's my
people
cousin's
don't like
story.
That story.
They got what's called Pure Health Foods, and they're in Las Vegas. That's all they do.
Oh,
Natural
fantastic!
foods.
So
Natural is a
take a look
term,
before you hand that back. Look at where it says nationality and tell me what you see.
United States of America.
How's that a nationality?
No, it ain't.
What should it say there?
American national.
Or how about U.S. citizen?
No, you don't want to be a U.S. citizen.
No, you don't want to be, but that's what nationality is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you could be now. Another thing is, since we were state republics or republic states, that should have been like Nevada.
But that's all an illusion.
Yeah.
See?
Now it is.
Yeah, because even if it was a republic, it would still refer to persons, which is not you. Which means none of those laws apply to men and women. They only apply to the business entities that we think is us. So they can regulate themselves or any other business that is pretending. So we're pretending to be that entity, and we're not. It's clear you're not a Walmart. You're talking to me. You can't be an entity. A spirit is an entity, but I can see you. So you exist as a man. An entity exists as a non-tangible being. That's why a human being is not a man. It's a being. So a spirit is a being. You can't touch it. You can't hear it. You can't feel it. That's what a business is. It exists in their realm, but only in their realm.
So would the word spirit be a good word to use in legal documents?
No, never, because you'll never see that. If you're operating using this first and last name in their realm, you never step foot in a courtroom. If a defendant is, in other words, if you get a ticket, let's say, for example, you get a citation, they're going to write that ticket and they're going to say, well, I need to see some ID. So if I show this to them, I've never been pulled over, but if I show this to them, they're going to say, okay, well, then your last name is Herrick. No, actually, if you look at the passport, it says, oops, sorry. Are we okay there?
I think so.
Can you still hear me? Frank?
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that way, right there. I just knocked the piece of equipment off the table. So if you look at the passport, sir, it doesn't say first and last name. And there's one other very important thing that's missing on a passport. An address. There's no address. It says Pasadena is where this individual, they're going to call this an individual, but it's a man. This man was born in Pasadena. There's no address, which means that if they want to send something in the mail, they want to post. Oh, I did disconnect something.
Okay.
Thanks, Frank. If I want to post something to you, I would send it in the mail. That's why they call it the postal service. The post office is a very important part of this realm of commerce. It's all based on service. So if they serve you with papers, they need to identify you as that first and last name. So when they come to the door and knock on the door, are you Douglas Herrick? No, I'm not. But if you have business with Douglas Herrick, I'm the one you have to go through. I'm the CEO and I'm the name holder. So I represent that person. So what are they going to do? They're going to say, well, I need to serve Douglas Herrick. Well, I can accept that on behalf of Douglas Herrick, but Douglas Herrick is a business entity. Gosh, I don't know how you're going to do that. You're going to have, I am not the registered agent. That's what some of these shill groups are trying to say. You're the registered agent. No, you're the name holder. What does that mean? That means I hold all the property that's in possession, that I have in my possession, that's owned by and held in that name. So that property that's held in the first and last name, I control that property. I don't own it. So if you're going to try and take it, you're not going to take it from me. You're going to take it from that business. And guess what? That business is registered and can maintain that name in a court action. See, it all goes back to what is the penalty for not registering that name? When you get sued in a court and a ticket is a lawsuit, that's a complaint. When you attempt to defend that person and you say, I'm that person, guess what? You can't. Why? Because it's not a registered entity. When you show it's a registered entity and you say, I'm the one representing that entity, and guess what? I'm in full compliance with this law that Nevada revised statutes has, and I registered in the state of Minnesota because Nevada doesn't want my business. See? They won't let you register the proper way. They had to leave one portal open for everyone to register. If you look at every state, they've been changing the laws on this one obscure part of the law for the last 15 to 20 years. Almost every year there were revisions in California. Some of them were minor, but someone else figured this out before I did. I'm sure of it. I can't prove it, but before there was the internet, how did anyone tell anyone?
That's right.
You'd have to buy ad space in a paper. That's expensive, right? That's the only way or get on a radio show. But how many radio stations that are in the mainstream media would cover this kind of information?
None of them.
None of them, because they're corporations for the most part. So this is the way. So a corporation, let's take Bill Gates, for example. Does he pay income taxes? Do you think he has a personal income tax?
No.
Of course not. Why? He has zero personal income. So people say, well, then how does he live? He has foundations and corporations that own all the property, that his house is owned by the foundation.
Well, it's like Rockefeller said, you don't own anything, you just control it.
There you go. So the maxim in law where they say possession is 9/10 of the law, what's the other 10th?
Control.
There you go. Keith is right. How do you gain that control?
Give the prize.
How do you get that control? You register the name. You comply with the law. And if the state isn't allowing you to comply with the law, then whoever the CEO is going to be held personally liable by my business. The business I control is going to sue Alejandro Padilla. And what I propose is that we all get together and we have a class action. All our businesses get together and we form a class action lawsuit against that person. And of course, do they claim to not have assets? No, they have lots of assets. So this is how you hold even police officers personally accountable for their actions. Because if they act outside the scope of their employment, this is why it's so important for them to determine that you are identified as that first and last name. When you tell them that's not me, and I got proof of it here, and they still touch you and say they take you to jail, that's kidnapping.
Right.
You cannot arrest a man. You can arrest a person, but here's the person. You want to arrest that person? Here, it's right here. This is the person. Go ahead. Arrest that person. Take it to jail. It's a piece of paper. They know this. And people are wise to this. You see it on YouTube.
Oh, especially in England. There's some good cases.
Yeah, they'll come in with this and they'll say, you're asking for this person, here you go.
And the constables refuse to arrest them.
But this is not proof that you're complying with the law. So you can't really operate in commerce, right? That's the thing. If people say, we know there's a problem with this legal name, so just get rid of it. Well, that's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. How do you survive? You have to be able to separate yourself from that person, because the person is what operates in commerce, not us. We're not a party to any of it. And that's what you want, because if all the laws apply to persons, which is a business entity, then it only applies to that business, not you. If they touch you, you can hold that person accountable. And if the court wrongs you, it would be the clerk of the court, not the judge. The clerk, these are all administrative courts. The only thing that makes it criminal is you. You're claiming to be that person. When you have proof it's a business entity, what is that? That means it's a civil case.
Well, Gil has
administrative.
Gil has a good question. What if you tell them you just don't have a first and last name?
But you do. You do have a first and last name. It's not yours though. It was a creation of the state. I pull this out and say, look what's at the top here. State of California. That's the same thing. This looks like the same kind of paper they put the registration, the title on. It looks like a title. What's at the top? This is a title. That's the owner. So if there's any debt attached to this name that the government agent is saying I owe, well, I don't own that name. I control all the assets that it owns, but the owner of the name is the state of California. If there's debt attached to it and you claim that there's a let's say, for example, a tax debt, guess what? The state owns it, not me. So they're the ones that have to pay that debt. And guess what happens to the debt? It disappears because it wasn't real to begin with. Something that appears and disappears is not real. So when you try to make an appearance in court as that first and last name and say, yeah, that's not me, what is the judge going to say? Well, then why are you here? Because it says the promise to appear was for that person to appear. If that's not you, it's a business entity, then that's the last place you want to be. Now, if you're acting on behalf of the plaintiff who has filed a suit against, say, for example, a person that's a government actor, then of course you want to appear. But you're acting on behalf of the plaintiff.
Just another actor.
And it's a civil case.
The thing that I wanted to ask was, by saying that you didn't have a first and last name, you were trying to indicate that that's not you, because then you follow that up with saying that I have a surname and a given name.
Well,
So that's separating the two.
well, but when they come to the door, knocking on the door, looking for Douglas Herrick, I'm going to tell them, I know what that is. It's not a who, it's a what. I know what that is. If you have any business with that entity, that first and last name, you're going to have to go through me. I'm the name holder. So I do have a first and last name that I use, but it's not mine.
So they'll end up kidnapping you and take you down here.
Exactly.
They may.
No,
It's
they
never
will.
happened to me.
Well, they will here in Nye County.
They will. They have. I
So
can vouch
you'd
for
have
that.
your other cases.
What's interesting is that I've had conversations with Nye County sheriffs about this. And as soon as I start talking about this, they say, have a nice day, and turn around and walk away.
Yeah, well,
This is not right.
they've already got some legal problems because of the same issues right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard all about the fact that the sheriff, I guess, is a new sheriff and brought a guy named Berkowitz back or something that had been basically demoted to the prison system or the jail system. She brought him back into the office, and I don't know if I should tell that story. Because
freedom of press.
Berkowitz is his name. He's a sheriff here in town.
Deputy.
Well, he's actually I believe he was a sergeant, and now he's promoted himself to lieutenant.
He promoted himself.
He promoted himself. Well, the sheriff did, but essentially, I think there's some bribes going on here. There's some payoffs. The whole system is comprised of bribing people. Attorneys bribe judges to get. That's why if you have a lot of money, you know what you're paying for. Part of that's going to the judge, and another part of it's going to the clerk of the court.
Right.
They're being bribed.
Yep.
When they go into the chambers to talk, they're talking business.
That's called bonuses.
How are we going to settle this matter?
Yep.
Well, I'm going to need at least 15 grand if you want this guy to not serve any jail time. Okay. That's all done behind closed doors.
Yep.
That's what these people are doing. And they're hiding it from us. And we should be angry. But rather than get angry, I say, let's get smart. Let's unite. Let's show them their law and that we're complying with their law.
Too many people in Pahrump have their heads in the sand. They just don't care.
Yeah, and that's true everywhere, though.
And most of them come out of California as ex-corporate employees. So they've been playing the game all these years, so they don't want to change it.
People are waking up, though, Gary.
And those of us who do know and want to live accordingly need to be left alone.
I'll go along with that.
That's right. I mean, ultimately, that's our goal. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
Can I make a quick comment to you?
Sure.
Because I want to pick up what you're talking about for the money part.
Yes.
Because I can tell you firsthand of a gentleman whose son was was when building a house in the county. The city came out and said you got to have a permit by the city to build this house. Now, since when does the city have authority over the county? First question. Second thing is, they took and threw him in prison for 10 years. Okay?
For not having a permit?
Right. And then they turned around now in the last year and said, oh, we'll let him go for $600,000.
Of course.
See, now they put a price on what the value of what you were talking about.
They held him for ransom.
Right. So, but here's what, if I was him and that name was registered, I'd say, okay, you're saying I need to get this permit thing. All right. Where's the contract between the agency that you're representing and the business that owns this property? Well, wait a minute. A business owns this property? Yes, sir. It sure does. Where's the contract? This is all tied to property taxes too. Where's the contract?
Yeah, if they don't have a contract, just like signing that citation.
That's right.
If you don't sign it, you don't have a contract.
So where's the foundation for that contract? Driver's license. That's why they just make the presumption everyone's got a driver's license. Mm-hmm. So that's the foundation for their entire system. So is it fraudulent if they're basing it on that? No, because that's voluntary. That is what they're using, though, to say, we're going to take you to jail.
But then you get failure to full disclosure. Am I right on that?
Well, yeah, any contract has to have full disclosure. And if you're a contractor, you know that better than anyone.
So I'm saying here they didn't disclose everything you need to know. That's just like when you sign your signature name on your signature card. They're not telling you. That's really telling you that you know the IRS code and banking regulations.
Or how about when they hand this to you, before you go down to the and I'm holding up the certificate of live birth. Before you go down to the DMV, you should read these rules here, because this is not you. This is the business that you're going to be operating. How about disclosing that to us right in the beginning?
A prime example, dealing with the Internal Revenue Service. Did they bother to tell you they're a private banking corporation, not part of the government, just because they got the name? That doesn't make, right. I'm going through one of their sites.
They're all private.
I'm going through one of their sites, and they're listing all these things that they say are scams, but we know they're not scams because it's the law, and they don't want the people to know the law, like House Joint Resolution 192 to the bankruptcy. But they don't bother to tell you that the IRS is the scam. They're not just full of disclosing themselves.
Remember, taxes apply to persons.
Right.
Not men and women. And they are actually disclosing something that is very, very true. It's one word. Voluntary.
Oh, yeah. They don't like to. Well, where does it say it on the forms anymore?
It's all over. I'll show you 35 places at minimum in the tax code.
Well, I'm talking about the 1040.
But you're right.
When you used to get them, it used to be on the front page. They took it off.
Yeah.
Right.
And they don't bother to tell you, too, that it's the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, the income tax.
Well, how about listening to Harry Reid when Jan Fried, who's the interviewer, asked him the question? This whole interview was about the voluntary tax. So Jan Fried, who's the interviewer, says, okay, well, Harry, what if I decide I don't want to volunteer? Oh, well, you have to volunteer. Well, wait a minute. Then it's not volunteering.
Yeah.
It's mandatory.
Yeah.
Oh, no. If it was mandatory, we'd just take it out.
Right.
We would just take it out. Are we out of time?
I don't know. Are we going to a break or taking out of time here? Okay, we're going to a break.
Right.
I guess we're wearing out Frank here. Okay, I thought you might have been confused there. So we're going to break. This is 98.1 FM, and our call-in number is 775-990-4900 if you'd like to call in and leave a question. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
You're listening to your local radio.
98.1 FM, KPFD LP, Pahrumps Freedom Radio.